Good morning, evening, or afternoon, depending on what side of the pond you're on, and welcome to Across the Pitch. We're the show for people who think Vanarama was an 80s pop duo.
You mean they weren't?
Well, Vanarama is the sponsor of the National League, and they're a car leasing company. But the 80s pop duo who were from London is Banarama, and I'm pretty sure that Darren had their poster on his wall next to Whitney Houston back in the 80s.
I think I did, Tony, actually, and Phil, I think I did, but I don't think it was anything to do with the singing prowess. I think they were quite attractive young ladies at that particular time, and I was a teenage boy, so there you go.
So were you devastated when Siobhan left the group?
Oh yeah. I'm still trying to get over it.
When you guys just stop talking about 80s pop, let me know, because I'm lost.
Okay.
Well, let me go ahead and get past this little intro here. And my name is Phil Kennedy, and you probably already noticed that I have both Darren Woodhead and Tony Robinson here with me today. And we're about to talk about something that's a bit controversial that's come up recently. And that is the plan to basically merge the National League, which is currently the fifth tier in the English football pyramid, with the League Two, which is the fourth tier. And the three of us have maybe some differing opinions on this, and I kind of wanted to have a little discussion here. And I think that we had talked about that Tony, you kind of wanted to give some history on the way things used to be before the present pyramid to kind of get us started.
Yeah, I think it's worth looking back to check on the history, because obviously when you talk about a potential merger of League Two and the National League, this is not something new, because as we talked about in our discussions, this was in place from 1921-22 to 1958, where there was a third division North and a third division South. And it basically came about because there was two divisions, and then apparently the Football League wanted to create a third division. And most of the teams that went into that third division in 21 were from the Southern League. And so there was a bit of a Southern bias or imbalance. And then they decided to have a third division North. And that ran, I think, really, there was 22 teams to start with in the South, third division South, and then 20 in the North. That expanded in the North to 22 teams in 1923. And then I think it went to about 1950 when both leagues expanded to 24 teams, which is the present number of teams in the divisions now in the lower divisions. So, I mean, it did run for a long time, from 21 to 58. And I think the reason it sort of ceased to exist is because then it went to they wanted to go to add a fourth division. So they created the third division and just a fourth division. So that's my sort of look on the history of it. And unless you, Darren, you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, just a little bit. I mean, because obviously we were going to come on talking about this last couple of days, I've just been out of curiosity going back and looking at the original setup in, like you said, 1921, etc. And what does jump out to me as North and South is the amount of teams in the Southern Division who are the same established Football League teams now, 100 years later, 99 years later. I mean, Phil, you would know 20 out of 22. And there's a couple of exceptions where you'll get a couple of Welsh teams that were in at that particular time. The North, there's a lot more fluidity from, teams who have fallen by the wayside. Nelson, who were close to Accrington, Wigan Borough, Ashington, and these type of teams. So I've just started to notice, and it may be going off tangent a little bit, but how much more fluid the North seems to be with teams coming in and out of the Football League compared to the South.
You both have made interesting points that kind of led to one of my first concerns. And Tony, you'll kind of understand this in North America in baseball. You know how you have the American League and the National League, and then because all of the teams that have the most money, like the Yankees and the Red Sox, tend to be in the American League, that the National League almost gets looked at as a secondary league sometimes, even though they're both divisions within the same league. And I've kind of had the same concern because, I mean, from my understanding, it is generally there's a lot more money with a lot of the southern teams than there is with the northern teams in general. So is it going to become at some point where the Southern Division is looked at or weighted more heavily than the Northern Division because that's where the money's at?
Yeah, I mean that's a good point there, Phil. And I suppose it's a list of pros and cons as we can, we'll work through it. From a football purist, it's something I've never really been keen on. But as you move into the current times and the status of the clubs, you see what's happened to Bury. And if it's a lifeline that could keep clubs alive, I think sometimes you may have to just put your true footballing beliefs to one side. What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, when you look at the reason for the start of the North and South in the 20s, it's obviously, if you were to do it now, it would be for different reasons altogether. And I think that's why I think what you can look at is the formation of the leagues, and you've got something to as a template to go by if you were to do it. Because I mean, it can be done where you can have historically you can divide teams into the north and teams into the south, and generally have equal strength in each league. And from a geographical point of view, there would always be a couple of teams, 2 or 3 teams in the Midlands that would be sort of a swing team. But I think it's the reasons to do it. Yeah, if you were to do it now, would be totally different. It would be out of from my point of view, strictly from it would be a financial reason to do it.
I think in 1920s, you had teams that were traveling on horseback. So things are a little bit different back then. And I understand the idea of saving some money on travel and maybe getting some more derby games. One of my concerns is, okay, so you have the Premier League is already going to lose money on their TV contract this year. That tells me they're not going to have more money trickling down to the lower leagues. And then what you've done is you've expanded by 24 teams. So you've got 25% more teams. And then my understanding is that the split as it works now is I think that the money that trickles down from the Premier League, that the championship gets something like 70% of it, and then like 20% to League One, and then 10% to League Two. I know those numbers aren't exact, but then so what are you going to do? You're going to take that 10% and divide it among 48 teams now instead of 24. And I mean, what percentage of that team's income is that TV money? Plus, you're going to have teams coming up from the National League. Like we've already discussed, Harrogate, they have a plastic pitch. We know Accrington spent $300,000 to replace their pitch. And that was just changing from natural grass to new natural grass. So, I mean, any of these teams that have a plastic pitch, they're going to have to invest £500,000 just to be able to get their pitch up to league standards.
Yeah, but I mean, we talk about the drop-off in revenue, and it's probably a fair point to say that we are now comparing, a split between the 4th and 5th tier, whereas in previous days, we were in the 3rd tier that was split out. But if you're talking about revenue streams, and maybe it will drop off with Sky or BT or whatever, there's also gate receipts where you take Morecambe, for example, the similar size club to Accrington, but they're in League Two. If they're playing Chorley on a Saturday, you could expect 1,000 Chorley fans to go to Morecambe. If they were playing Crawley, you might get 50.
Yeah, I think that's valid, Darren, because there's a lot, and you can look at teams, on Plymouth, Torquay, teams down in that area, from Barrow to Torquay. Let's face it, if you get a coach load of supporters going down, that's probably going to be it. But if you've got Barrow playing at Hartlepool, there's going to be a greater attendance, and as you say, that translates into more gate receipts.
Yeah, and it's gate receipts. It's the bar takings. It's corporate. They probably get more sponsors in for games when there's a bigger crowd. So it is a knock-on effect, and like good point, Phil. It's just working out, the pros and cons financially from that drop off in TV money to that extra revenue at turnstiles, etc.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know from what Andy Holt has said that at least at the League One level right now, that his TV money and his gate receipts are about equal. So I guess the club basically has 3 revenue streams, and each of them are about 33%, with gate receipts being 33%. TV money being 33%. So then you have to look at so say for a League One team, I think that he said something like £750,000 was the figure. Don't quote me on that, but so let's say that it's £750,000 is the take for a League One team. That maybe £350,000 would be the take on TV money from a League Two team. Then so now you're going to divide that down to where every team's only getting 175. So you're basically taking about £175,000 away from every team, assuming that those numbers are generally correct.
Yeah, I also thought, is there an opportunity though, if they've started to break away into their own leagues, to get other separate TV deals? You don't know, regional TV. I suppose it's a changing landscape altogether, isn't it?
Well, that's something I was thinking about, Darren. Is there an opportunity to get other television deals? Because there are networks out there looking for sports content, and whether it be in North America or in Europe or just in England, but there is that opportunity, and I think that's something that would certainly obviously contribute in the way of a revenue stream. One of the things I was going to add is that I was reading just the other day where there's the talk about playing some of the matches in the lower leagues behind closed doors, which obviously would be a devastating effect to a lot of smaller teams, Accrington being one of them. And I think that was the chairman of Huddersfield said that, there's the potential of 50 to 60 clubs that could go out of business. That's obviously a drastic number and worst case scenario. But if teams have to pay for expenses of running a match without having any revenue, if they're not compensated, obviously that's going to create a financial strain on a lot of clubs. And I think strictly from a business point of view, what you want to do, and I think that's what Andy Holt said when he came in, he wanted to cut down expenses and increase revenue streams. And when I say cut down expenses, it'd be more streamlined in his expenses. And I think that's what some of the teams that may have to do, and the proposed split of the North and South as the better opportunity to do that than leaving it as status quo. And if you're ever going to make a change with this pandemic, this is the time to make a change coming out of this, if the EFL wanted to do a change.
As long as the leagues remain part of the EFL, then my understanding would be they wouldn't be able to negotiate their own TV deal. They would be locked into that structure, and whatever the Premier League and the EFL negotiates, they're kind of locked into that. And my understanding has been that ultimately this has been what has prevented the lower leagues from kind of breaking off from the EFL, is that they're basically committed to, or they're stuck with receiving that money from the Premier League, because basically they get paid out their money by the Premier League a year ahead or something like that. And if they were to negotiate their own TV contract, then they would end up going a whole year without receiving any money at all before their contract paid out. And because of that, it basically prevents them from breaking away from the structure, because they can't afford to go a whole year without getting that money from the Premier League while they would wait for their own TV contract to pay out.
Yeah, that's a good point, that, Phil. Just one positive point for me would be the fact for supporting a team in the lower reaches of English football, you would be able to watch your team almost every Saturday. Within an hour or two, you could watch all the away games, which, that's got to be beneficial to most football fans.
Well, by U.S. standards, Accrington to Portsmouth is a derby game, so, it just sounds like a bunch of crying. You got the world's smallest violin playing for it.
Right. Well, Phil, I'll tell you what, that makes me cheesed off. Cheesed off, right? Because I think it does. I see these comments on Twitter and Facebook about, we go 100 miles for a loaf of bread, etc. I don't think supporters in the US sometimes realise the weekly grind of supporting a club and watching them away. And it's not just money, it's time. So you can have 2 away games within a week, one at Oxford, one at Southend. You're on a coach for 24 hours on that Saturday, and then you can have another away game on the Tuesday evening. And it's not just money. It's and I don't think until you've been in that situation where you're supporting a club and wanting to go to games, I don't think you can, really understand it.
Well, I think it's like comparing apples to oranges, and you can't compare the transportation highway structure in North America to England, and so going from Accrington to Portsmouth, obviously, like you say, Darren, is it's a full day trip when you add in the match and you're gone all day. Here in North America with the highways and interstates, it's a lot shorter and easier commute. So it's really sort of to me it's not sort of a fair comparison in the sense that when you get on
it really is apples to oranges, because realistically, unless you were retired and didn't have a job or anything, you wouldn't be able to physically travel to every away game over here. As good as the highway system is, like we were talking about, Phoenix plays in the same division as Tulsa. And I was telling you last night, assuming that there was a road that went straight there, if you started driving in Accrington and drove to Berlin, you'd still be 100 miles short of Tulsa.
Yeah. I know what you mean, but I think you have to look at it more than a one-off instance, where you can get to in a day. And you can look at a map of England and say, you can get from anywhere to anywhere within 24 hours trip, and with the match in and everything, which it can be. If you're going to Ipswich, you're setting off at, say, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, you'll get back in the early hours of the following day. You can do it, but do you want to do that week in, week out? And when you go on a supporters bus to some of these away games, and I've been on one or two, the majority of the people on there, like you said, Phil, are retired because they haven't been at work all day. They've no commitments, family, etc., jobs, trying to juggle. So it's not always easy to watch your team away unless you're a youngster, with no families, teenage guys and young lads, and then the older end who are retired. So it's not easy.
No.
Well, yeah, even with our shortest trips here, like Vegas is the shortest trip for Phoenix. that's a 5-hour drive each way. I mean, even as good as the interstate system is, I mean, so it would be the same situation as going to Ipswich. And I guess that's what I'm getting at is that, even our shortest trip over here is going to be a whole day trip. So when I hear somebody, like I said, when I hear, I'm watching on iFollow and I hear something like 500 fans made the long 75-mile trip from place X to place B. I'm like, 75 miles? That's like not even here to Tucson.
yeah. I'm not going to buy it anymore, so
no.
I just like giving you guys a hard time.
I know you do. Yeah, I don't mind. It's good fun. No, it's genuine. It's genuine reason for doing it. For me, will be just to be able to, as a pure football fan, just to go to most games.
Well, yeah, and I think it's definitely one of the pros that I have. Obviously, was from a team point of view, is reduced expenses. Obviously, for the team, you increase, like we mentioned, local derbies, and that increases the gates and more revenue for the team. Easier for away fans, obviously, to make the travel, like you say, and it prevents teams from going out of business, or potentially prevents them from going out of business. The cons that I had listed, that really now it creates an extra division in the EFL, and does that make it a weaker product down at sort of in that these. With the lower teams coming in, is it a weaker product that's out on the pitch?
Yeah, quite possibly. I'd got something similar listed that you are, like Phil alluded to earlier, you do lose that prestige of national football, and I know what it meant for Accrington to get back into national football when we got in the conference. Even it's that certain bit of kudos, isn't it, of being playing in a national league? I don't know what you guys think.
Oh no, obviously yes. Sorry, Phil.
No. I think what you guys are talking about now is my biggest objection. It waters down the product. It's ultimately going to make it looked at as not as big a deal. Basically, it'll be like getting into League One will be looked at the way that getting into League Two is looked at now. It will be, and then the League Two National League, to me, it will be looked at as an inferior product to the rest of the football league. And I mean, and yes, you're getting more local derbies and things like that, but you're also missing out on Ipswich comes to town, or Portsmouth comes to town, or when one of those bigger clubs falls down to League Two for a year or two, you miss getting to have those big clubs come down because they're in the South now. I mean, and so, yeah, you might be gaining some revenue on some local derbies, but what are you losing out on those big matches that, maybe even end up as a nationally televised game and get the club more money that way?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, but there's nothing to stop these big clubs falling into that tier of, they're not going to be exempt from getting on a terrible run, are they? And dropping
what I'm saying is Ipswich could never go to Accrington because they would be in the South at Accrington.
Oh, right. I thought you meant the size of the club. Okay. Sunderland could, though, couldn't they?
Yeah, Sunderland could. Yeah, but what I'm saying is like Ipswich, Portsmouth, Plymouth, any of these southern clubs, Luton, they're never gonna come to Accrington ever again, and those are some of the bigger crowds, and those are I think Luton is kind of a bit of a rival of Accrington, and then you take it a rival and put them in a separate division completely. I mean, not that any of those clubs are even in League Two right now, but I'm just saying that in the future, I would like to be able to play against those clubs if happenstance happened that we're in the same league again.
Yeah, it's a good point. And also one other further point I put down with the cons was the relegation and promotion situation, which is obviously going to be a big game changer, isn't it? And on that point as well, and some of the teams in the Midlands, when they did the third division North and South, they actually changed the division. They played in both North and South depending on how many teams. I think Coventry did it and one or two others, depending on the makeup of the split. Yeah, so that's another
what is your
scenario.
basic Dixon line? It would be anything Leicester on down is south, and anything north of Leicester is north.
But it would change depending on the teams and who's gone up and down from that league. Yeah,
like for example, say heaven forbid, say Accrington was to go down into that northern tier, and say a teammate like maybe Walsall might have to go from the north and just be moved over to the south to make accommodation for the team dropping down. And it's all based on geography. That's how they did it, like you said, Darren, how they did it in the past. And there was always 3 or 4 teams that would fall into that category: Northampton, Port Vale, Walsall, Mansfield, teams of Notts County, teams like that would be switched of no fault of their own, but they could be told one season, okay, you're in the south, next season you're in the north. So I guess that would be a con then, wouldn't it? It's not sort of nothing positive about that.
I mean, another concern that I have is, so we're talking about a team like Chorley at the bottom of the National League that's part-time right now, or even a bigger club like Harrogate that has the plastic pitch that they're going to have their challenges with going into the Football League. What concerns me even more is now what you're setting up a situation is that 12 months from whenever this happened, you're going to be promoting 2 teams that are in what's now the 6th tier into the Football League. So, I mean, you're talking a team like a Warrington. Are they really ready to be in the Football League?
No, but there are other ones, Phil. If you look down through the pyramid, you've teams like Altrincham with a good history, the new stadium being designed. You've got Boston United, who are a lot bigger club than Accrington potentially, with the size of the town and the ground and their history. They're ready to go with a new stadium. So, there are some teams who maybe some, your AFC Fylde and Chorley and some of these are hanging on in the conference. There's other teams waiting in the wings as well.
I think you'd have to obviously have some standards or requirements for a team to be promoted, such as, like you mentioned. And I thought when I looked this up, I thought the National League was fully professional. It says what I read, it was most of the teams are professional. So obviously some are not, and like you pointed out, Phil. And the north and the south of the National League are semi-professional. So that would push further down where teams lower down would have to become professional. And hey, could they afford that? That's a big step, because we all know it was a big step for Accrington to go professional, and that was because of some proceeds, I believe, from player sales.
Well, and then there's players at that level who don't want to go professional because they make more money at their day job than they could make playing as a professional in the National League. So they would rather split their time and play at the 6th tier and then make their money at their 9 to 5. I mean, that's just the nature of some of these people's lives.
There's one option that you could look at, but and is that, do you have in the north and the south, do you have only 20 or 22 teams in each division as opposed to 24? So say you would have 48 teams. Maybe you go down to 40, and then you eliminate some of those bottom 8 teams that would be semi-professional or grounds that wouldn't be up to standard. But is that because they did propose, they were talking a couple of years ago when they wanted to have another a league under the EFL. We're talking about having fewer teams in each division, and then creating some kind of a trophies or cup games to make up for the loss of those extra games. And obviously that didn't go over well with most of the teams. So I'm just throwing that out there. You could do it with lower teams, but I don't think that's something that a lot of the existing teams would go for.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things that when you first start to look at it on paper, it seems like a good idea. But I just think that there's too many moving parts, and ultimately, I think you're going to end up maybe helping out a few of the teams that are League Two or the upper tier of the National League, but it's going to be at the expense of forcing a bunch of teams below them to bite off more they can chew.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, I think I do agree with you. Just I'm probably 60-40 in favour of staying as we are, and the 40% is, I think, without some kind of change, some kind of reform, I think clubs will continue to go out of business. Personally,
I think that's those numbers you quoted, Darren, and I think that's a good time to bring in the poll that you ran on your on the memories page. I think that split was pretty close to. I think there was 63% said no, 37% said yes. So I was surprised. There's obviously a lot of people, like the setup, like the traditional North, the National League setup kind of thing, as far as in the League Two, and where they are full country teams in it. I was surprised. Were you, Darren, or did you expect a different?
I was, yeah. Maybe it's because it's an Accrington poll, mainly made up of Stanley supporters. It'd be interesting if you could get a good reflection of teams who are currently playing in League Two. The National League and what they feel. Yeah,
I just think one thing that you're losing out on is the ability to have different teams and different players from all around the country, and you miss out on that experience. Like I remember you telling me, how big of a deal it was the first time Sunderland came to Accrington, or the first time that Ipswich comes to Accrington, and you just lose out on some of those experiences. And I think eventually you're going to get tired of playing Fleetwood and Morecambe and Blackpool every week.
Yeah, maybe. But I think when you're in League Two, if you take yourself away from League One, which is, like you said, Phil, you're talking about playing those big teams nearly every week. When you're in League Two, it is only occasional that a big club drops to that level. So, we did have Bradford and Portsmouth.
Portsmouth's been down there. Bradford's there now. Luton's been down Bradford,
there. Yeah. I don't class Luton as one of those massive clubs, to be honest. But, yeah, I know where you're coming from.
They're
I think
usually above that. I mean, I'm just...
Yeah, I know what you mean. But I think...
I guess where I kind of came that from is when I was looking at some of the attendance figures from League Two. I noticed that in Accrington and Luton was a 9,000 crowd, which is the second biggest crowd after Coventry that season. So I mean that's kind of why I was thinking that was one of the bigger teams.
They've been a successful team, definitely, over the last few years. Yeah.
The only people that think Luton are a big team are Luton supporters, as far as I'm concerned.
That's some more fans we've got from
League Two. They're a bigger team.
Yeah. No, they've got a good history, and they're going in the right direction. But obviously, there's no love lost between Accrington and Luton over the last few years.
No.
Well, right. That's why I want that rivalry to continue. I don't want them to be shoved down into a Southern Division where we never play them again.
Yeah.
I think if it comes down to the fact where there could be several teams that could go out of business, it's something that for the sake of the football pyramid, that it's something that the EFL would have to look at. I think in my heart and traditionalist, I would say no, leave it at it. But when you read on just the other day, Macclesfield are being looked at, investigated again for late payment. They've had points deducted, and if that's one team, and there could be other ones that are struggling. I'd hate to see, 6, 7, 8, 10, or whatever of those lower in the League Two go out of business because of finances. If it could be solved by doing a split, I'm not saying the split would do it, but it's one option that could help teams from being folded.
No, I totally agree. I think we're pretty similar there. So for you, Phil, it's a definite no forever.
Yeah, well, I mean, I did say that I was going to take that side of the argument today. Yeah. So
it's nice. It's nice that you went into this discussion open-minded, though, Phil.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I was open-minded when I first heard the idea, and it's just kind of one of those things where the more I thought about it, the less I liked it. I mean, what can I say? I'm a purist.
Yeah, well, I am too, and I think the only thing that may change your mind if teams start falling by the wayside is when we saw.
I guess I don't see how this is a solution that's going to stop teams from going out of business, and I just think it's one of those things that it's a short-term band-aid that would long-term do more harm than good.
Yeah, that's a fair point again, but when you think of since this 1958, I think, when we went to 4 divisions, there's been very little changes in the whole of the football leagues. But one thing where there was a lot of resistance at the beginning was playoffs, and people just didn't want them at all, didn't see it as a way forward, and it has become a success. So people don't like changing in football; they like to stay the same. But sometimes these things that you need to change can help teams.
Well, and you could be forced into a change, and I don't think I'm not one to make a change just for the sake of making change. There has to be some valid reasons, and if the EFL can make sure that there's numerous teams aren't going to go out of business, because of coming out of this virus, and if they have added expenses that puts them over the top, then I think it's something they have to look at. But if we can carry on and have all the teams still in play, I'd go with the status quo.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bottom line for me is that the thing that I can't get over is just the watering down of the product. Yeah, it's just to double the amount of teams. It's going to water down the product too much, and it's going to be looked at as, like I said, it's going to be looked at where League One is going to be looked at like League Two is now. And this combined League Two National League is going to be looked at as a regional. It probably won't even be looked at the same way that the National League is, because just to me, when you go from regional to national, that's something.
Yeah, I think I'm going to change my vote because I voted, to look at the split. I'm going to change my vote to not to do the split and stay as the system has in place. So I've changed my vote.
Okay, but I think it's one to be revisited.
Yeah, I mean, there certainly may be some changes to be made. I think this is too radical of a change, is I guess what my biggest thing is. I think that there's some things that can be done within the current system to improve the current system. And then just wildly throwing in 24 more teams, it's not going to work.
Well, I think the EFL should have a contingency plan in place just in case at the start of next season, whenever that is, if all of a sudden 10 teams come and say, listen, we can't play in the league this year, they better have a contingency plan in place. And not just sort of, they want to be proactive and not just say, oh, well, we didn't see this coming. What are we going to do now? So if you have a contingency plan, then you can put something into practice. Other than that, if teams are going to be okay to play on next year, then leave as is. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, good chat, guys. Enjoyed it.
One thing I did want to mention here real quick is, so I see that some stadiums here in the U.S. have started talking about opening up at 25% capacity. I wonder what percentage of capacity does a League One or League Two team need to be able to be at to at least be at a break even? Would 25% or 50% be enough? I mean, I think that if Accrington was allowed to open at hit 50% capacity, that's going to be 2,500 that can get in. That would probably be enough to at least have the club break even.
Yeah, but the problem with that as well, I thought about that myself, Phil. So if you say you did get 2,000 something in that region, 1,000 plus of those are season ticket holders. You probably don't make as much money as from those as you do from pay through the gate. So that'd be an interesting way of splitting it as well.
Yeah, because the season ticket holders, would want to have first choice, and it reduces your walk up gate. That reduces your revenue. So trickle down effect.
Well, yeah, I guess that's what I was saying. That might be a good question for Andy. Would be, what is the number that he needs? I mean, when I heard 25%, which is what they were talking about here, I'm thinking, that's not even going to get in all the season ticket holders. And the number I was thinking was 50. But, that would be a good number to ask Andy is, what percentage capacity does he need to be able to open with to be able to at least have the club break even?
Well, and then there's all that social distancing thing to come into play, or if they're within a certain distance, does everybody have to wear a mask? And then it's just a lot of things to take into consideration. But for the point of this,
it's another show, isn't it?
Yeah. I think for the point of this show, I think we've covered what we wanted to talk about, and we've made some good points. And I think if teams are going to be able to survive, leave it as is.
It's been a lot of fun, guys, and we definitely need to do another one of these chats again. It's been too long coming, I would say.
Yeah, I'll say, and I think you've got your good subject matter there. You've already mentioned it, Phil. That's a definite follow-up.
Yeah, let's plan on that, and maybe I'll put out the question to Andy on Twitter and see what he has to say.
Yeah, like Darren said, it was a good chat, and appreciate the time spent with you fellas today.
Enjoyed it thoroughly, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers, mate.
Bye.